Good morning, everyone. It's Craig Studnicky from ISG World and RelatedISG. Today is May the 1st. I'm here today to present the Q1 update of our Miami report. We're a little bit late getting this to you this time, I know, because we've been working rather diligently to kind of defrag a lot of misinformation out there about what's happening not only in Florida, but South Florida. You know, when you look at the headlines, whether it's The Real Deal, whether it's the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, South Florida Business Journal, the Miami Herald, my God, they are painting a picture of South Florida as if the condo market and the single-family home market, the residential real estate market, is in bad shape. They couldn't be more wrong. And but I have to, and with the YouTube videos are even worse. They make it sound like all of Florida, the condominium prices are declining at a rather rapid rate. I will walk you through the facts today, and if you give me the next 20 minutes, by the time I'm finished, you're not only going to be informed, but you're going to be quite motivated to realize that what we have been dealing with kind of a down market has changed. Things are starting to pop again. And the experts out there that are painting a different picture simply don't understand the facts like you will very soon. Let's get started. I am going to start with a little bit of sobering news. This article came out in USA Today in January. This is from the National Association of Realtors. They were quoted saying that almost 4 million homes were sold last year in all throughout the United States. Well, 4 million homes is kind of a low level of real estate transactions, velocity, if you will. In fact, according to the National Association of Realtors, it was the slowest year since 1995. That's 30 years. You know, there are a lot of RelatedISG agents that work with me, and last year I was watching them, you know, complain about their social media consultants because maybe there was something wrong with their individual websites. Maybe there was something wrong with their Instagram accounts. Nah. You know, when it's low tide, there's not much you can do. Low tide is my metaphorical analogy for a slower market. You have to wait for high tide. We're constantly reminded of the cycles here in South Florida because of our proximity to the beautiful Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, no, when it's low tide, it's low tide. And what you have to do is just wait it out, because I promise you what follows low tide is high tide. And folks, the tides are changing. Let's get started by thematically talking to you about how I'm approaching this particular Miami report. I'm borrowing from Charles Dickens. This was required reading for me when I was a much younger man. The Tale of Two Cities. Because when in fact when you read these stories from the media or you watch a YouTube video about Florida, you will get very confused about what's happening in South Florida. And in fact, some of the older inventory, particularly the older condos that are 30, 40, 50 years old, they have challenges. They are in fact problematic. And that's what it seems like most of the journalists are focused on. But you know what they're not focused on is the younger inventory. They're not focused that much on single family homes, and they're not focused that much on pre-construction. But I am today, and I think when you finish this presentation, you will see that it does seem to be a tale of two cities based on, again, the media that can be so confusing. Let's get started with new construction. This map we've updated for you. I think at the end of Q4, there was something like 122 projects that had been announced here in South Florida since 2020. It's a combination of short-term rentals and what I call traditional condos. So they would be condos with rental restrictions. There are now 14,000 short-term rentals, a little more than the traditional condos. The total of all of this is almost 30,000 units. It's 28,193 units. You know, almost 20,000 of that, 2/3 of that inventory, is what we call the downtown core. It's Brickell, downtown Miami, Edgewater, Midtown, and Wynwood. That is generally considered the downtown core here in Miami. Most of this inventory is there, particularly the short-term rentals. However, for the remainder of this presentation, I'm going to focus more on the traditional condos. And why? Because that's what we really need more of in order to accommodate the population growth that we're seeing here in South Florida. The population is not just growing, it's accelerating, which I will show you towards the end of this presentation, in numbers that surprise me, and I'm sure they're going to surprise you as well. This next slide is one of my favorites. I call this my Esther Jimenez slide. Esther is one of my colleagues in ISG World, and she uses this quite extensively. And I know I use this in a lot of my M reports, but I do it to give you context, because I believe that we are really in 2025 going to feel supply shock again. You're going to feel that it's more of a seller's market than a buyer's market. Again, a bit contradictory to some of the headlines that you're reading or those YouTube videos that you might be watching, but the facts suggest that I'm more right than wrong. In the 2000s, we built too many condos. This was almost 59,000 condos in Miami-Dade County, Fort Lauderdale, Broward County. It wasn't too many, it was way too many. Listen, they all got sold, everybody lived happily ever after, but we didn't need to build that many. In the last cycle, we built just under 20,000, 19,400. My partner, if you will, and my co-writer on the Miami Report is a woman named Athena Rosano. And she and I have done this math over and over again. We realize we have to build almost 20,000 units every 10 years just to accommodate population growth. Forget the second home buyers, you would have to add more. Forget investor sales, you would have to add more. No, you have to build almost 20,000 every 10 years, once again, just to accommodate the population growth that we're experiencing here in South Florida. Now let's go to this cycle, which began in 2021, really, because nothing really started in 2020. There are now, in 91 traditional condo buildings, a total of 13,000 condos that are in development. However, there's only 6,900, call it 7,000. Half of that inventory are actually going vertical. Now, by the way, that's a big jump from Q4. If you're following the Miami reports, there were like 4,000 units that were going vertical at the end of December, and now we're up to almost 7,000. That's a really good sign. But here's the thing. We're not building 20, 30-story buildings anymore. They're 50 stories, they're 60 stories, they're 80 stories. The Waldorf Astoria in downtown Miami is 100 stories. Now, these buildings take time to build. Oftentimes, I've referred to Aston Martin, that beautiful architectural masterpiece in downtown Miami, right on Government Cut. It took 6.5 years from groundbreaking to TCO, temporary certificate of occupancy. That's when closings begin on these buildings, in order for that building to be completed. Yeah, these buildings take a while. There are almost 7,000 condos under construction, but a lot of these condos will not get finished until 2028, 2029, even into 2030. So the question remains for me, and I hope for you as well, what do we do between now and then? Well, for the people that continue to move here, particularly from the US, which is the strongest part of the demand curve here in Miami, we have to look at MLS. We have to look at what's available in MLS, multiple listing service, the resale inventory, both for single family homes and for condos until this inventory gets delivered. By the way, the balance of it, whether this is good news or not good news, you have to expect that they won't be delivered until the turn of the next decade. Yeah, that would be 2030. That would be 2031. It just takes time, guys, to build these buildings. Again, we're not building small buildings anymore. We're in super tall territory right now. And we don't have a choice. Remember that South Florida is bracketed to the east by the Atlantic Ocean, to the west by the Everglades, in order to accommodate the tremendous popularity of South Florida. There's only one way we can do it. We have to go up. It's vertical time. And we're reaching the sky like we never have before, and we need to, but they are going to take some time. All of that said, despite what's going on with tariffs right now, despite what's going on with these stubbornly high mortgage rates, I'm still seeing, and so will you, prices of younger condominiums and all single-family houses, also known as standing inventory, going this way. Let's get into it. Oh, I just thought I'd add this little fun fact that of the 91 condos that are in development, this is pre-construction, only 12 of the 91 are priced from $500,000 to $2 million. Only 12. The rest are $2 million up to $100 million. Yeah, there are oceanfront pre-construction condos in Miami Beach and in Palm Beach where some of the asking prices from developers have now reached $100 million. And there will be a buyer for that. There will be, because we're seeing it already. And why is that relevant? When you look at the actual condo trades in the last 2 years, 2024 and 2023, 85% of those sales were between $500,000 and $2 million. We all love to talk about the pre-construction properties because the architecture is just spectacular. And when all those buildings get built, the Miami skyline will be the envy of the world. I have no doubt about that. But when you consider when you look at the actual facts, the people who are moving here from all four corners of the U.S., not to mention Latin America, you look at the actual trades, 85% are between $500K and $2 million. That's a meaningful number because it influences the rest of our Q1 presentation. And with that said, now let's go to resales and let's look at what happened with multiple listings. But before I show you what's happened with inventory and what's happened with prices, take a listen to what my friend Barbara Corcoran talks about as relates to inventory with single-family homes. I'm a real fan of this woman. I think a lot of you are as well. So let's take a listen.
You already know that mortgage rates are still high and house prices are going up still by 3 or 4% a year. You shouldn't waste any time in stall buying your house, and let me tell you why. The real problem in the marketplace is that 2/3 of homeowners are sitting on interest rates under 4%, and they're not going to move. Don't stall. Get out there and buy a house.
What Barbara Corcoran is basically suggesting is, remember back in 2020 and 2021 when mortgage rates went like this, everybody refinanced their homes. Now she's saying that 2/3 of all of the homeowners throughout the United States have mortgages less than 4%. Assuming she's right, you're not going to see that inventory. Heck, if I am an empty nester, I am a baby boomer, and if I lived in a house and it was just a little bit too big for me, I'm not going to sell it with a low mortgage like that. I'm going to rent it. I'm going to move east anyway and buy that condo on the ocean or on the bay or on the intracoastal. But I'm not going to retire that low mortgage so soon. That's almost like free money when you compare that to current interest rates. She's right. That inventory remains stubbornly hidden. It's not going to get much of that. And it's influencing what's happening with actual trades with single-family homes all throughout South Florida. Take a look at this. Total active listings here in South Florida have risen of houses, and that's really good news. Because please, let's not forget, there's over 220 companies, mostly Fortune 400 and Fortune 500 companies that are relocating to South Florida since 2020. There's more or less somewhere between 85 and 90 of them that are already here. The rest of them continue to pack. But the people who are moving here with those companies are looking for houses. A lot of them are looking for houses near soccer fields and schools because the average age of the people that are moving here in the last couple of years is below 40. The profile of the new residents of South Florida is very different, just from an age perspective, than the profile that we experienced before 2020. But we do have a nice relief in inventory with single-family homes. You can see from even last year, it grew from 11,000 up to almost 17,000 houses. That's good news. Now, we always separate this out for you, the A, B, and the C. The A house is a house that's less than 15 years old, and it's on the water. Most of them are contemporary in terms of architectural design, and they're spectacular. A B house, it's just like the A, it's just not on the water. And I call everything else a C house. So let's take a look at what happened with the resales of those homes. The A house, well, a year ago, we had almost 460 of those homes on the market in the Tri-County area. Now you're down to 301. It's declining. And look what happened to the average prices. The average list prices went from 18 million up to 21 million. They're going up. The B house, kind of similar pattern. A year ago, we had 3,500 of those to sell, and now you're down to 2,200. The average list price a year ago, it's self-explanatory. What was 6.9 million is now 8.5. It's going up. What is really fascinating to me is this next slide. I want you to go back into your memories, if you will, and think about the year 2021. It was the year of social distancing. We were all busy getting vaccinated. We were all wearing masks. And there were people all over the world, particularly all over the United States, that were coming to South Florida to buy a house. Social distancing. It was the easiest way to manage social distancing was a house. So the most velocity, the most sales we've ever seen of single-family houses north of $10 million was 2021. Until this year. Yeah, until this year. Despite those headlines again, despite the YouTube videos that some of you may be watching, we doubled the amount of $10 million transactions in the first 3 months of this year. And by the way, that's 10 million. I could show you stats about $15 million homes. I could show you stats of $20 million homes. Same pattern. We broke records in January, February, March of this year. You know, and this is all being led obviously by the wealthy, by that top 1%. There's so many of the top 1% that are coming to South Florida. What is it about the wealthy? Well, a few things. One, they've got a lot of money. They're not interest rate sensitive. They buy whenever they want to buy because they can. Number two, I suspect they have information that we mere mortals don't have, because the amount of those wealthy people that have descended on South Florida in January, February, and this year, it's a lot more than it was a year ago. A year ago, it was only 63. The year before that, it was only 37. All of a sudden, they're busting a move in 2025. It could be because they know the market has been a little bit soft, and what a time to buy when the market is soft, as opposed to buying at the height of the market, or you might call the apogee, the top of the curve. Yeah, they're buying now. It could also be a little bit of asset protection thinking. A little known fact about Florida, this is a homestead-friendly state. What does that mean? Something I rarely talk about, but in Florida, when you homestead your primary home, God forbid anything should happen to your personal finances, no one can take your home in Florida. That's yours and your family forever and ever and ever once you homestead it. So perhaps that's going on in the thinking of some of these wealthy people as well. I don't know. What I do know is that a lot of trades happened this year. And in my 45 years of selling real estate, I know this. Every time the real estate market starts to rebound, it always begins with the wealthy. It always begins with high-end real estate, and then it starts to trickle down. And the trickling down, I'm noticing as well in the month of April. But we'll talk about that more when we finish Q2. What's interesting as well are condos. I'm going to get to condos in a minute, but I just thought I'd add this fact now, because we're seeing the same pattern with condos. Yeah, condos north of $10 million. Condos, the year of the condo was really 2022. Remember, because the masks were off, we all got vaccinated. COVID was kind of going into our rearview mirror. It was sort of over. So people then decided, okay, now I want to go back to the condos, because there's a lot of condominiums on the ocean, all east of 95. 95 is kind of like the line in the sand here in South Florida. Most residential real estate west of 95 are houses. Most real estate east of 95 are condos. And the condos are on the ocean. They're on the intracoastal. They're on the bay. They wanted to come back east again, and they did. In 2022, we sold a lot of condos north of 10 million, 29 of them. But we broke that record this year. Yeah, again, despite the headlines, despite these YouTube things, we sold more condos north of $10 million in January, February this year than we ever did. Again, driven by high-end buyers, but they're starting the rebound of the real estate market in Florida. I had a mentor of mine once tell me that whenever the United States slows down in terms of real estate transactions, Florida is usually the last state to go into that kind of a slowdown, but the first one to pop out. And sure enough, we're seeing it again. We're seeing it with these sorts of transactions. The C houses, I know we talked about how the prices of the A houses went up, prices of the B houses went up. Same thing's really happening with the Cs. These are just everything else that's not an A and a B. A year ago, we had close to 7,100 of these on the market at an average price of $850. You have more inventory now, almost double, but the average price went from $850 to $1 million. Again, despite the headlines, prices continue to accelerate here in South Florida. Now let's go to condos. This is where most of the focus of those negative journalists that like to say negative things about Florida and South Florida, this is where they mostly focus. It's okay, I'll defrag it, I'll unscramble it for you. A year ago, we had close to 18,000 of these condos for sale. Now it's grown to 23,000. I may have said to you before, when there's somewhere between 20 to 22,000 condos for sale in multiple listing, that's our resale inventory, you kind of reached equilibrium. It's not a buyer's market. It's not a seller's market. These are fair negotiations between both buyer and seller. And now you have a little more than the 22,000 baseline. You have up to 23,000. So it looks very much like it's not just fair. It may even be a buyer's market when you look at the condos and you look at that inventory, until you age the inventory, which we're about to do for you. So much of the aging is influenced by these new milestone laws that took effect in this past December. It was actually made into law in the year 2022. It basically means that all condos north of 30 years of age, 30, 40, 50 years of age, must hire structural engineers to do a proper structural engineering study on the structural components of those buildings. Roofs, swimming pools, sliding glass doors, windows, balconies, you name it. They want to make sure that the structural components for those buildings are intact. And if they're not, they need to get fixed. They need to be brought up more or less to code. Well, what's happening with most of these 30, 40, 50-year-old condos is they're getting the bill from the structural engineer. The condominium associations don't have the money to repair, to make the necessary repairs for these buildings. So they're issuing what we call special assessments with most of the condos in these 30, 40, 50-year-old buildings. These special assessments are shockingly big. I've heard them for as low as $20,000, but as high as $400,000 per unit. The irony of all of this is that most of the people that live in 30, 40, 50-year-old condos are retired. They're on fixed incomes. They're not real interested in writing those checks to fix these buildings. What they are interested in doing is selling. And that highway of inventory of 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old condos has gotten quite crowded. Let me show you. When you look at the 23,000 condos that are currently listed for sale in MLS, over almost 20,000 of them, 19,680 are over 30 years of age. There's only 3,300 that are less than 30 years old. And guess what? Those are the condos that the buyers that are coming to South Florida are asking their friendly realtor to show them. The news is out. The word is out about these 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old condos and special assessments. Not a good idea to tread into that area right now. It's not just the buyers that are hesitating to go there, it's the lenders as well, which I'll touch on in a second. But when you look at the amount of inventory that's less than 30 years old, 3,300 in the Tri-County area, this is Miami-Dade, Fort Lauderdale, Broward, and Palm Beach County. Now, welcome back to the seller's market. This is not a level playing field. This is not nearly enough inventory, not nearly enough to accommodate current demand, particularly when you consider that the pre-construction inventory, beautiful as it is a long way off from being delivered. So what do we do in 2025, let alone 2026? You have to focus on those 3,300. Do I expect that inventory to disappear? Do I expect that inventory to rise in price this year? And you will too. About a year ago, if you spoke to any mortgage lender in South Florida and you asked them, hey, are you loaning on these older buildings? Most lenders a year ago would have said, well, we're not really excited about that anymore because we're a little nervous about special assessments. See, it doesn't matter if you're a buyer or a lender. The fear of walking into that black hole of special assessments causes everybody to back up. Well, that got a little bit easier in a way for the mortgage lenders. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac a few weeks ago came out with this blacklist. This is a list of over 690 buildings that they basically said, if you're a mortgage lender and you lend on any of these buildings, we're not buying those mortgages. They blacklisted all of them. So any mortgage lender that might have been considering lending on those older buildings, they're out now. So the older buildings have no mortgage financing. You only have a cash buyer out there, and most cash buyers are reluctant to walk into these older buildings, again, because of the special assessments. So folks, we have 3,300 units to sell. That's it. What's happened with pricing? Well, okay, I'll throw a bone to some of these journalists and some of these YouTubers that like to talk about South Florida prices of condos going down. When it comes to the older condos, they've got a point. The older condos, because it's mushrooming in terms of the amount of inventory for sale, and because, again, of special assessments, they declined last year by 21%. That's a fact. So they've got a point when it comes to that. On the other hand, when you flip the coin and you look at what happened with the younger condos that are less than 30 years old, now they're up by 8%. And that's why you can't lump all this stuff together, because people that are lumping it together are usually journalists. And the difference between them and me is I sell real estate like you do every single day. And anybody who does sell real estate knows exactly what I'm talking about. The younger inventory is selling relatively quickly, and the prices keep inching up. And that's despite high mortgage rates. So there we go. We've separated the age of the inventory. We've shown you what's happening with pricing. And now you know, 3,300. I can look you all in the eye and tell you that I have every reason to believe that the 3,300 condos that are currently in MLS for sale will be gone by the end of the year, and the prices will be up at least 8%. This next slide is a bit fascinating to me, almost a little frightening. Most people that are moving here are asking their realtors, by the numbers, it's not just my opinion, they're saying, well, I do have some reference here because we have about 400 agents that work at RelatedISG, and they inform me all the time about this. They really want to see condos that are less than 10 years old. Why less than 10 years old? Well, because they're nervous about the structural integrity studies and the concern about future special assessments. Well, a condo that's less than 10 years old, it's too young to have any kind of structural issues, and it's a long way off from that 30-year problem. So most buyers coming to South Florida are asking their friendly realtor, take me to something that's less than 10. Well, look at this. In 2024, there were almost 12,000 of these condos particularly east of 95, that traded between 500,000 and 2 million. Remember that earlier slide? I said that 85% of all transactions last year were between 500,000 and 2 million. Well, take a look at what traded last year. In Miami-Dade, it was 6,200. In Broward, it was over 3,000. In Palm Beach, it was close to 2,500. That's how many of those condos were absorbed, sold last year. So the obvious question that I wanted to present to all of you today as we're walking into 2025, what do we have for sale now in that price category? Not much. There's 676, most of which are in Miami-Dade. There's only 13 in Broward County, in the whole county, and there's only 30 in Palm Beach. Folks, that might as well just say zero. We have a problem with inventory. Forget the old stuff. The people that are moving here are asking for the younger inventory, the stuff, especially the stuff that's less than 10 years old, and there's nothing to sell. What are we going to do? Well, this is what gives rise to condo conversions. Again, part of the tale of two cities. There are almost 35,000 multifamily units in development since 2020. Multifamily is a rental building. It's an apartment building. Industry-wise, we refer to them as multifamily. Almost 35,000. No, I'm wrong, almost 60,000. 25,000 of the 60,000 were delivered in, say, the last year. And the effect of that delivery, well, these are the numbers. There's 34,000 are still they're still under construction. 24,000 have been delivered for a total of nearly 60,000, 58,700. But here's the effect on rental prices for the 25,000 that have already been delivered. They're down by 8%. The rentals were climbing in 21, climbing in 22, climbing in 23. They started to go down in 24 because we added 23, 24, 25,000 rental units in South Florida. It's a lot of inventory. Yeah, the population is growing, but that's a lot of inventory in an 18-month period of time, and the effect was rents dropped. So your guess is as good as mine as what happens in the next 18 months when the other 35,000 that are under construction currently get delivered. Rents will go down. Multifamily developers are now looking to convert those buildings to condominiums, and the timing couldn't be better. We need the inventory because most Americans that come here, they're not really renters, they're homeowners. They want to own a piece of the rock. They want to own real estate because real estate is really how you create wealth. But when they come here and they ask the realtor to take me something that's relatively new between 500,000 and 2 million, there's not much to choose from. This is where we're going to get the inventory, and it is coming because the rents are dropping. That's good, I guess, in terms of affordability. But in terms of for sale inventory, many multifamily developers are, in fact, now considering converting. And I suspect you're going to be hearing a lot of that this coming year. George Perez. George Perez is our partner in RelatedISG. He's the chairman of the Related Group here in South Florida. For that matter, all of Florida. Nobody built as many condominiums in the state of Florida than Related. They may not just be the biggest developer in Florida. They might be the biggest condominium developer in the United States. I have a lot of admiration and respect for George. He still works every single day. He's so passionate about Florida, passionate about what he does. You know, he has a little more experience at some of the cycles that I've been through and some of the cycles that you've been through. Recently, a few weeks ago, he and his two sons, John Paul Perez, who is the CEO of Related, and his other son, Nick Perez, who's the president of Related, were all interviewed on CNBC, talking about real estate market conditions here in South Florida. Take a listen to what George has to say about the roller coaster of pricing, cycles, if you will, here in South Florida, because he makes a very key point that I absolutely agree with, and I'd like you to listen to him.
If I had to put my money someplace over the next decade, you know, it would absolutely be South Florida. You know, it's not just Latin America, it's not the Northeast, it's not California, but lots of people from Europe. You know, last night we had a dinner, you know, with very wealthy British people that adore Miami.
Compared to Britain right now, I mean, the wealthy are fleeing Britain more than New York right now.
That's right. You know,
so that's
right.
That's great for you guys. Plus, the weather's a little better here.
It's a little better, right? Yeah. So yes, you know, we see great growth. You know, Florida since I've been in business for 50 years has been a roller coaster, right? Yeah. What I always tell the investor, the buyer, is when the roller coaster goes down, the next up has
gonna be
ever
higher.
been higher.
Yeah.
Always has been
Always
higher
higher,
than
yeah.
the previous high in the roller coaster.
Yeah.
His point is very well taken, because what he said I've experienced every single time Florida goes into what I'll call low tide and then moves into high tide. The pricing of all residential real estate is reset at a much higher price than it was at the previous high. It happens every single time. He's not only forecasting that, he's grounding that in his experience. And a little bit later, once I finish the demand, I'm going to add to George's confidence in that forecast. And I suspect that you're going to see that reset in the second half of this year. Yeah, it's right around the corner. Now let's talk about demand. Demand. I said earlier in this Q1 presentation that the population of Florida, particularly South Florida, isn't growing, it's accelerating. Last year, we grew at an unprecedented rate in the state of Florida. We've been averaging like 950 to 1,000 people a day in the last 10 years. We've been averaging that really for the last 20 years. Everybody likes to, I've seen so many realtors refer to Florida's growing by 1,000 a day, Florida's growing by 1,000 a day. They're right, that's kind of the average. And the growth is determined by the U.S. Census Bureau, certainly not me. What they do is they simply measure people moving into the state of Florida, they subtract people moving out, they add births, they subtract deaths, and that number equals X. The fastest growing states in the United States are Texas and Florida. Sometimes Florida outpaces Texas. Most times, honestly, Texas outpaces Florida. 3, 4, and 5 don't even matter. It's really about Texas and Florida. And remember why that's so important? The fastest growing country on the planet Earth is India. The second, by population, the second fastest growing country is China. The third fastest growing country is the United States. It has been for the last 30 years. Despite immigration policies, despite, we're still the third fastest growing country in the world. And we real estate agents here in South Florida, we get to sell real estate in the second fastest growing state in the third fastest growing country. And when you look at what happened last year, we're not growing by 1,000 a day. We moved almost 1,300 a day. No, folks, it's accelerating. It's accelerating. And again, if you discount out the 30, 40, 50-year-old condos temporarily, and temporarily it could be at least a year, then you're not left with a whole lot of inventory, and that explains why prices continue to go up. Because the whole world has discovered what you discovered, what I discovered 32 years ago, how magnificent it is living and working here in South Florida. I'm about to conclude the Q1 Miami report, and I'm going to use this interactive map that shows the growth of the population of the entire state of Florida over the last 100 years. I did this a year ago, and there were so many of you that said, oh my God, Craig, I loved it, could you do it again, can you do it again? I'm gonna do it again. But before I show this, I want to give you a few baseline facts to consider. These represent the top 20 states out of the 50 states in the U.S. Florida's not, we started in 1920. Florida's not on here. Florida doesn't show up until 1949. And I wonder why 1949, so I looked it up. You know, 1945 was the end of World War II. And a war-weary nation, the Americans, the soldiers that came back from Europe, the sailors that came back from the Pacific Theater, man, they just wanted to enjoy their lives. They've been through hell and back. And that's when people started to discover Florida. It was 1949. That's when Florida hit the top 20. In the 50s and 60s, we invented this thing called air conditioning, which made living in Florida 12 months a year very, very attractive. In the 70s and 80s, airfare became inexpensive. Prior to that, it was only for the wealthy. But once airfare became much more affordable for everybody, it seems like the whole world discovered Florida. In the 90s, that's when I noticed that South America, all of Latin America, started to really discover Miami and South Florida. And that added to the punch of demand that we have for our residential real estate. I'm about to walk you through it. I will walk you through it. I will go through certain milestones because in 1920, the population of the United States was 100 million. In 1976, we hit 200 million. In 2006, we hit 300 million. Currently, we're at 340 million. Remember, we're the third fastest growing country in the world. Let's get started with this. Here we go. Here we are in 1920, and we're moving. You see the top 5 states is New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Ohio, and Texas. Florida is nowhere to be found in the 20s and in the 30s. Watch New York stay the number one most populated state for quite a while, followed by Pennsylvania. This is all Northeast stuff. Illinois, which is the home of Chicago, and then we're rounding out with Ohio. We're approaching 1949 now, and here comes Florida. And in the 50s and 60s, we invented air conditioning. And look how Florida just it's like a meteor coming out of the sky. We went from the top 20 to the top 10 before 1960. And as I said earlier, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, air travel became a lot more affordable, which is when Florida continued to increase. By the early 70s, Florida passed my home state of New Jersey and continued to rise. We're not just in the top 10, we're in the top 8 now as we approach the 80s, saying goodbye to Michigan and very soon to Ohio. Now you're number 6 in the country, and by the time you get to the late 80s, you're definitely in the top 4 and continuing to grow. Isn't this nuts how popular Florida is? Hopefully you've noticed that California and New York have changed positions. New York is now, by the turn of 2000, the number 3rd most populated state in the country, no longer number 1. Florida is firmly number 4. California and Texas are indeed impressive the way they continue to grow. As we approach 2012, Florida, wave goodbye to New York. Yeah, goodbye, New York. I know once, Tom, you were, the Empire State was number 1, but no mas. It is California, it is Texas, and it is Florida as we come to the end of 2024. With 340 million people living in the United States, 23.3 million people living in the state of Florida. Yeah, no, the population is indeed not just growing, but it is accelerating. I suspect at the end of this year, the 1,300 people a day that we saw a year ago will continue this year. We might even pass that record. In summary, this tale of two cities, it basically boils down to a lot of the stuff that you read in the media. Do your best. We gladly give this information in the Miami Report to all of you to combat some of the negative articles that appear in various media, whether it's YouTube videos or magazines and various newspapers. What they're not doing is taking the thoughtful approach of separating the differences with all of this inventory, mostly grounded in the word age, particularly with condominiums. The wealthy are coming to South Florida, and they have already started the rebound. George Perez, our partner in RelatedISG, suggested that when the rebound does occur, you're going to see a new set, a whole new bar set, if you will, of valuations. Yeah, prices of houses and condos, once we're all in agreement that the rebound is happening, you're going to see prices at a higher level than you saw when it was at its apogee, its highest level, in about a year ago. Because it happens like that every time, combined with the fact that we really don't have enough meaningful inventory that's attractive enough for people that are moving here now. The now is what you're going to find mostly in multiple listing service, the resale inventory, together with condo conversions that will appear on the landscape this year. That's what's happening in South Florida through March 30th, through the end of Q1. I get to see you all again in July. Yeah, July, that's when we present Q2. I have a very strong feeling that everything that we've seen, everything that we presented to you in Q1 will continue to play out during April, May, and June. And until then, as always, I'm wishing you the best of luck. Blue skies. I'm sure you're going to do quite well. Don't let those negative Nellies get you. Florida is happening again. The rebound has occurred. The wealthy have spoken, and they continue to come. So until July, wishing you all the very best. Bye-bye.